morality is not enough. We need to be men and women of character. And I couldn't take people where I was unwilling to go myself. When I looked at the decreasing voter turnout rate, voter participation rate in our own county, it saddened me. It's dropped now below 50%, and they're expecting this turnout to be anywhere from 15 to 20%. And so I stepped into this race to make a difference with the people whose lives I have an influence over. And I wanted to see them embrace once again this gift of a republic that we have. And so I stand before you today just like you. I have a college degree from Fresno State. If you're wondering where Fresno State is, it's the Harvard of the San Joaquin Valley. I graduated with a history degree. My wife and I have been married 25 years. When I graduated from Fresno State, I went into sales. I worked for Helene Curtis, Cheeseboro Ponds, Unilever, AC Nielsen. I became a divisional manager. I went on to seminary and committed my life to the ministry, and we've been doing that for the last 20 years together in our married life. I would also share with you that I was born and raised in a town called Coronado, California. My father was a naval officer. We come from a long family of public service. My father had 3 tours of Vietnam. Right now, he's in a rest home with Alzheimer's. He may not make it to his 86th birthday. I wanted to say goodbye to him last Thursday. And as I look at my father's legacy and my mother's legacy, she was the president of the Republican Women, and for those of you who are Democrat, I would just simply say this is the joy of America, that we can agree that we disagree, but we still engage in this representative form of government. And so, having experienced this in Coronado and growing up in a city that no longer had large developments, but we had to live within our means, and the decreasing revenues and the increasing costs, we watched as Coronado became a resplendent city. And then I contrast that with the city that I got my education in, Fresno, California, that was run by developers and special interests, similar to the ones that want to redevelop our downtown with high density and mixed use. And we watched as they absolutely destroyed Fresno, and it became the city with the second highest murder rate, second highest car theft rate. But when the public and the private sector came together, we saw the largest decrease in crime in FBI statistics history of a city that size. It became America's finest city in '97. I participated in all those events. And I stand before you today, here to earn your vote. Before you leave, all of you will have my cell phone number. Just like Chase, I want to be accessible. I don't want to get more people to the city council meetings. I want to bring the city council meetings to the people. There's no reason why we can't have a satellite feed right here with live questions and have one at the Goebel Center and one over at the Newberry Park Library so that people can participate in the city council meetings instead of a handful of people in the back room making decisions for us and complaining that no one can navigate the halls of confusion of government to try to get to a city council meeting on an odd day of the week in a very difficult time. So I'm here to represent you, and I'd be honored for that opportunity. Again, I'm Rob McCoy, and I'm running for city council. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rob. Elizabeth is, if anybody's starting to have some questions, please hold the card up into the air. I have one that I'll start with to get people going. Do you need a card, or do you have a book? You have a card?
Well, I wrote a card, but I have
okay.
a question.
All right, well, I'll get to that in a minute. We're going to start with the cards. I do want to, before anyone has a chance to leave, that means you, Esther. Oh, she's leaving. The election is June 2nd, so it is a special election. I didn't say this at the beginning because I wanted everyone here. It is really important that you all vote. I think one of you told me that 20 votes can make a difference, and because it's such a small turnout. So this room could make a difference. You need to vote. You can do it by mail. All it has to do is be in by June 2nd. You can take it in that day. Our drivers can take it for you. You still have your voter, mail-in ballot. So please make sure you get it done after today, and somewhere between today and June 2nd. You got some questions for me? Okay, these can be either to an individual or to all three. First, I'm going to start with one that is probably for, I kind of got a feeling from Rob, unless I'm off, that you chose to do this because of the things you've seen elsewhere. You said, I need to get involved in government. But I want to know from Chase and from Dan, was there a catalyst? Was there one thing that really made you make this decision to step up? Or is this something you've been wanting to foray into politics, and that's why you're kind of here today and doing this?
If I said 5th or 6th grade was probably the time when I got selected for one of the volunteer things you do in 5th or 6th grade. Through high school, I participated in something called Key Club through the Kiwanis Club, and I was actually chosen as the Boy State representative. Meeting a gentleman by the name of Philo Chambers, who he's been gone about 15 or 20 years. Philo Chambers helped to create an organization of young men, and then also now there's one for young women as well, to teach them the things about civics that are not being taught in our classes today. In fact, if you looked at our curriculum, you think, where's the civics courses? Where's the history courses? They're not there like they were before. So it was a civics class and actually Boy State representative that actually got me to a point where I said, I want to give back someday. Cheers.
I've always been interested in politics. First off, I was taught to read from the newspaper by my grandmother and not from the comics either, just the regular news. So very interesting things I learned there. My grandfather was in the military, and he went on to serve on a board of supervisors in Amelia County, Virginia. He pretty much was my political mentor. He actually helped build a veteran cemetery out there, so it's kind of what I sort of grew up wanting to do it. I had decided at some point that I didn't really want to be involved in it because of the negativity. I said, why should I subject myself to that? But then I saw some issues around the city that I didn't really like how they were being handled, such as what happened at Westlake Plaza, and I said, okay, well, I can suck it up and do this for the city and help make a good contribution to the city.
And a separate question for Rob specifically is, how do you envision your commitment to ministry influencing your city council service?
During the Assembly campaign, I was endorsed by Governor Rick Perry, Senator Rand Paul, also Governor Bobby Jindal, Governor Mike Huckabee. And the reason why is because we look at a community, we're segmented by minorities nowadays. That seems to be how people operate. And they placed me in a minority called the faith community. There's 85 million in the faith community in America. Of those 85 million, only 25% of them vote. And so the idea is, since 1954 with the Johnson Amendment, there's been a removal of influence from the pulpits in America to engage in the political process for fear of losing what they call their tax-exempt status. And there has never been a case in the history of the United States where that's happened. And so I stepped forward because the folks in our community were not engaging in the voting process, only 25% of the 85 million. And as I looked at that, I thought the skill set of a pastor is very similar to that of somebody who would hold office. The idea is you're a professional listener. That's what they teach you in seminary, to listen. You have 2 ears and 1 mouth. And so you listen. And secondly, you want to make good things happen for people. And as a result, on the front lines of dealing with every social issue imaginable, and as a Ventura County Sheriff's chaplain as well, I'm there at a critical stage in somebody's life. I've been at the bedside of over hundreds of people who have passed to comfort the families and understand their needs. I've been the one that they've come to when they can't make their mortgage payment or they're being evicted from their home. These are issues that you deal with day in and day out on a frontline basis as opposed from a distance. And the thing in a church is you can't raise taxes. It's amazing how politicians love to spend other people's money and be very generous with other people's money. I know how to live within the means to understand that the need has to be met with the resources that are available instead of milking the system. And so all of the skill set that comes with what I've been doing for the last 20 years is applicable to serving. It used to be that somebody who would serve in office was called a public servant. And that's exactly what I desire to do, is to serve you. And so there's my answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. Okay, I'm going out into the audience because, Sally, I'm reading your question. And I can, but oh, Environmental Quality Act. Okay, there I've been educated, just schooled me. Now a city council can okay a project without public input or environmental study after petition is certified. Would you vote for that project, meaning a project that hasn't been, explain what project they would be voting for?
Any kind of a project makes no difference. I don't know a thing about your project.
You probably understand this better than I do.
Okay. Yeah, what she's referring to is called CEQA. Okay? we'll call it the environmental out there. And what they've chosen to do is to determine what needs to go through a formal CEQA audit, okay, or not. Now, on one side of the ledger, you'd say everything environmentally should be CEQA certified. Well, that could be literally down to trimming a bush, all the way to the extreme of, no, just do anything you want. So basically what they've done is try to determine what attention needs to be given to certain projects. And so when you see the word CEQA exempt, that just means it doesn't have to go through that full audit process. It doesn't mean they don't have to meet guidelines. They have to meet guidelines. It just doesn't have to go through a formal CEQA review.
And so would you vote for that? Did he answer your
I
question?
wanted to know if
Just wanted to know how you
voted
guys-
for a project that had not had review.
Well, let's put it this way. Yeah. A good, and don't quote me on whether it's 90 or, a very large percentage of the projects that citizens like you bring to the planning commission or the city council are exempt from CEQA because they're within certain parameters. They're not what I'll call significant items. Items that are larger, all of those will have to go through this CEQA process. So it's a way of identifying a project and saying, what are the environmental impacts, and do we need to do a more formal study, as opposed to having to do something formally with every project that you can go through. So CEQA is a bit complicated, but the essence of it is, does it need to have additional review or not? Whether it does or not, it still has to meet standards.
I guess what appalled me was when I found out that the proposed stadium in Carson and in Englewood were passed by the city council without CEQA.
Yeah, without a CEQA study, that's because they also have something more intense that's called an environmental impact report. Okay, so if they're going through a full environmental impact report, you've got traffic studies, you've got environmental studies, you've got water runoff, you've got a lot of things that CEQA doesn't necessarily deal with. So they're all similar, it sounds like they're similar, but if they've done a full environmental impact report, that's the best protection you're going to get.
Yes.
Did anybody else have a comment about that?
It's self-explanatory.
Yeah, I thought you kind of explained it. Yes.
On that environmental issue, Dan, were you involved in the planning commission when Wesley Plaza was basically denuded of all its trees?
We're going there. Okay, no, the tree issue. Here we go.
So I'm standing, thank you. What's your first name? Sorry.
Pat.
Pat. So I'm at Bank of America making a deposit, and all of a sudden I hear chainsaws. Like, what's this? So I actually walked into the Regency Center and demanded to see the manager. I identified myself as being on the planning commission. He says, we have all of our permits. I said, I'd like to see them. So sure enough, he pulls them up all online, and he has all the permits. So I'm thinking to myself, how is it the planning commission doesn't know anything about this? So I get on the phone and I call Joel Price, I call the city, and I said, what's going on here at the boulevard, or on Westlake Boulevard? He said, well, they have full approval. I said, to cut down some of these oak trees? They said, why doesn't the planning commission know about this? They said, well, this was a over-the-counter approval. Over-the-counter approval? Really? City council members, I've asked each and every one of them, tell me about your knowledge about this permit process and this over-the-counter approval. And the answer was, none of them. What? Yeah. No one on the planning commission, no one on the city council knew anything about it. Now, of course, it's, well, how could that happen? When you go to the city, there are things that are called over-the-counter approvals, where you actually fill out a piece of paper, and so long it meets certain guidelines, they approve it. Well, because this project, fell under what's called owner-planted trees, because they were officially owner-planted trees, and they had a picture of these owner-planted trees that were 50 years old and had been on a drip system, but because they were owner-planted, the current law, which was passed in 2010, said that you could take out any number, that's the definition, any number of trees that were planted. They have pictures of these trees planted back in the mid-60s. So, how is it? It was all over the counter. Okay? So it's all over the counter. So that's the answer to your question. What's going on now is between a tree committee, the planning commission, the staff, the citizens, all groups have gotten together, and 5 separate bodies have not been able to agree on it. It's now going back to staff, and what I'm suggesting, and what was quoted in the paper yesterday, what I'm suggesting is have a tree committee that's ongoing, not that they just bring them together for 3 or 4 or 5 meetings. Bring them together so on an ongoing basis, if somebody wants to make changes to landscaping that involve trees, that you ask the citizens, so we don't end up with this over-the-counter approval ever again.
Yes.
Well, why that even happened in the first place is because Planning Commission approved it in 2010 that there was an exemption between owner planted trees and naturally growing trees. And, well, Planning Commission has to approve it first. And then council actually added that commercial properties could use the owner planted exemption. Now, my proposal is very simple, just restore the tree ordinance to where it was before, and you're not gonna have those kind of problems. Now, what happened with Planning Commission, and only one planning commissioner voted no on this proposal, is they wanted to change it where they want to change it where any owner can take out 3 trees within a 10-year span without review from the Planning Commission. This actually is almost worse than what was in place before, and we saw what a disaster that led to at Westlake Plaza. Now, as I said, I'm for restoring the oak tree ordinance to where it was before. Now,
I look at Ed in a sense, and I think Chase does as well, that he's not an opponent, he's a mentor. But if you elect either Chase or myself, you're going to get a younger version of Ed, and we're going to protect those trees. So thank you.
Okay, 2 of the questions from 2 different people are about the same topic, so we'll try to cover them both in one question. One of them is asking about dial-a-ride, so this is about, both of these are transportation related. Dial-a-ride, why can't we go see-me to TO, get these inner city options through dial-a-ride, that it's, it doesn't seem like that should be that hard to do. So can we do that? And the other one is, could we get a bus stop for Belmont and the Reserve up here at this corner somewhere? What would that take?
Give an example of what they're doing in Ventura, and I'm going to relate it to seniors here, and particularly this, is Ventura has recognized that they need to get their citizens throughout the community more quickly. It helps business, it gets you all to the services that you need on an ongoing basis, but at the same time without having to deal with driving there yourself. So in Thousand Oaks, whether it's dial-a-ride, why shouldn't you be able to go to other areas? What happens if you're a podiatrist or some other things up in Camarillo? Participation to where these routes go is key. And if I can always use the expression, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. All right. Now, what some senior groups, and I've participated with a few in the room here on these senior groups, is if we get a consensus as to what those routes would look like, and then communicate that to a council member, that's the only way it gets done. And I'm telling you this in terms of senior housing. I'm involved in the senior housing committee. The only way things get done is through participation at the senior level to make very clear and exact things. So in this case, if it's routes, if there's 6 or 7 routes, that's what you need to, if I use the word, sell to the staff and to the council, is that these are the routes that our constituents, our customers are demanding. So if I said it's a simple answer, it's simply getting in front of the people who actually need these routes, convincing other council members. Because think about this, many times on a council, you're trying to convince the other 4 to vote a certain way. And if I've got a predisposition towards seniors, which I do, hopefully that influence will transition to the other 4 people. But it gets down to seniors creating the routes and then having someone who pushes for seniors. Seniors need a bigger piece of the pie.
Okay, moving on down the line.
Well, that is one of the things that I've proposed, is to move forward with consolidating the transit system out here in East County. We pay a lot of money here in Thousand Oaks for the transit system, but it doesn't work as effectively as it should. So if we got together with the other cities out here in East County, Moore Park, Camarillo, Simi Valley, pull together the resources, we would be able to have better services. And with dial-a-ride, that would mean that those connections could be made more seamlessly. And another positive of it is that we could actually probably get more federal money for transit. As if the federal government, members of Congress, we got 2 members of Congress that represent East County here. They're gonna look at that as a whole consolidated transit authority and say, okay, let's put some money toward this. It has a decent ridership. There are people using it, and so let's do it. And as far as a bus stop over here, that would be one of the things that I would work with the Transit Commission to look at and city staff to look at. It should actually be hard to do that, but those are the little things that can be done. And a lot of times the little things don't get done, but that is one thing that I would make sure that I did.
Well, I'll let Rob, same question?
Sort of.
Well, let me let Rob answer it first, unless it was aimed at Chase.
No.
The answer that we saw at the beginning was this idea that you need to put together something and you've got to come together, and then we're going to try to get the other council members to. That is not serving the public. Our job is to come and find out from you what you want done and make that happen. And that is the difference between someone who's enmeshed in the government policies as opposed to somebody who's a typical citizen like all of you. I would also add that we're so concerned with not uprooting our oak trees, but yet we take no focus in the sense that we tend to uproot our seniors. And this is the fastest growing segment of our population, and it's what needs the most attention. Dan will tell you that he participated in the 50-year visioning plan with tens and 20 meetings, countless, and in that visioning meeting, not one single thing was addressed towards seniors. This is not a focus of the council. It needs to be, and if I'm elected as your councilman, I will make those things happen, and you will have access. All of you have my cell phone number. Thank you.
Did you have a follow-up on that, Pat?
I don't know how it goes, but Jackie Irwin was here, and we approached the dial-a-ride issue. Do you recall?
I wasn't in the room.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I did.
And at that time, Jackie said, no problem, we will deal with this because it's been an ongoing problem for
Dial-a-ride to senior, or which part of Dial-a-ride?
whichever way it goes. I'm not specific. It's just that they're interchanged, that if I want to go to see me from here, I can do it without the fact that I can, at this point in time, my pulmonologist happens to be over there and I can't get there.
Okay, so you're saying Jackie didn't take care of something she said she would. Of
That's
course,
exactly.
she was running for office at the time,
Right.
I will remind you. So, you know, we'll bring it up again, and I'm sure you're all hearing us on that. To all three of you, can I ask one question? I'll start with Rob, since you're the educator. Someone has asked, what kinds of opportunities for continued education are in Thousand Oaks, and how would you like to see those expand or decrease or whatever? Usually that's adult ed or continuing.
Adult education is what the question was, I'm assuming?
Yeah, I asked the question.
Yeah.
I was referring to things like auditing courses compared to taking courses for credit, which would require payment of tuition. Now, that can be expensive for some of us, and I was wondering if there would be any possible tuition remuneration for us. In other words, where tuition could be partially paid so that we could take courses and possibly earn a degree in some.
That'd be a wonderful idea. This is something that the Conejo Unified School District and the Parks Department would be deeply involved in. Certainly those would be the folks that we'd have to speak to have that happen. I would say in relation to those classes, they're absolutely important in our community. We need to focus on getting those. I like the idea of not just having to audit it, but being credited for it. I think that would be great. What's the point if you want to pursue a further degree? I would be in favor of pursuing that.
So would there be any way for us, for some of the tuition to be partially paid or sort of?
On a need basis, absolutely. I think that would be helpful. Sure. Yeah.
Did either of you want to comment on
We good?
continuing subsidized or continuing education for seniors?
I think if seniors needed to have a more continuing education, we should find a way to pay for it. Again, we have to look at the budget, make those smart choices. The continuing education is over at what was Waverly School. It's way up that hill. kind of hard to get to, so we may have to look at finding a way to have some satellite location or something that's more accessible to people, because it was hard for me to get to, so it's way up that hill. But I actually would like to see it be subsidized, and I think we need to work with our state and federal representation to make that happen. We've got a member of Congress, we've got an assembly member, we've also got state senators, so I would get together with them and see if we could get block grants to make that happen. Our budget is so pressed that it would really might be a little bit difficult to do that, but as far as block grants go, that would be what I would pursue. I've had an opportunity to meet all 3 of our representatives that represent Thousand Oaks at the state and federal level. They're very open to listening. So I would actually sit down with them and see what we could do about that. But I really do think we should have some subsidized education for seniors. The seniors are changing. They want more education. You can't look at it as getting old. You're turning to solid gold.
Thank you.
If I had to create a list of things that I believe that are most important for seniors, first of all, it wouldn't be saying that continuing education is important. It is. But if you look at the city budget, a shrinking city budget, if we had to take those subsidy dollars, where would I put them? I had to rank them, and Dan, you could only pick one. Senior housing. Senior housing.
Wow.
Yes, senior housing is the biggest struggle that we get. Okay? Maybe not people who live here, but go talk to 175 residents out of Valsito.
Yeah.
Go spend an afternoon like I have at the ranch or other mobile home parks, and you ask them the question, we've only got a certain amount of money for subsidies. Ma'am, sir, where would you like it allocated? Housing, housing, housing is what they would respond to. Now, I'm licensed instructor in 27 states, so education isn't in my blood. But I know in a shrinking budget, if you could only allocate money, where would I put them? It would be for senior housing. In a budget that had unlimited or more money available, absolutely. I'd love to be able to see seniors get their degrees. I think that would be great. I have friends whose parents are in their 60s and 70s and finally got their BA degree because their kids and grandkids got it before they did. But they wanted to make sure, literally wanted to make sure that grandma and grandpa got their degree. But in a world of shrinking things, I would allocate subsidies towards housing. Not to say I don't like education, I do. But sometimes you have to make difficult choices. And what I'm hearing from our constituents is subsidies should be geared more towards senior housing.
I'm going to come back to that subject as my last question, but the second to last question before I lose your interest is going to be a simple answer from the 3 of you, because this question was so long and difficult that I'm going to boil it down. They're trying to ascertain the level of conservatism versus liberalism in your philosophy of government. So looking at, very commonly, people go from city council to state, federal government. I mean, it is a stepping stone. So the question from the field here is, how conservative are you, how liberal are you? On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the most conservative, 10 being the most liberal, could you give me a number? Or you can just say decline to state, because this is too convoluted, but I didn't want to ignore the question, whoever put this one forward, so.
As a Goldwater trade person, you'd say he's the most conservative person on the food chain. Economically, yes, very conservative. My training is in finance, it's conservative. Social issues, though, some would say, Dan, you're a Democrat living in a Republican's body. You have political dysphoria. What are you? So I'd say socially, I would tend to be more on the Democratic side, but in terms of the question about conservatism, probably a 2.
Chase, would you like to answer that, or decline, or? Okay.
Oh, that's fine. Okay, so I was, my family background, that's a lot of FDR people, so, but I'm not necessarily, for this office, I think you have to sort of balance in between the 2. You have to spend smartly, which is more conservative, but you also have to make sure that you don't leave people out of the gap like seniors. So I probably would say I'm in the middle on spending, because I believe you have to it's about making choices. And I'm not gonna leave anybody out of the gap, but I'm not gonna go around overspending either. If you wanna talk about social issues, I'm probably more of an 8 there as far as being more lean towards the liberal side, because again, I come from a more socially progressive background, but I think spending is where it counts most, and I'm on the middle in that.
My political background is as mixed as my theological background. My Catholic parents couldn't come to their Protestant son's ordination because they're their Jewish godson's bar mitzvah. True story. But I would say that I am a Reagan conservative. Thank you.
Okay, last question, and we're going to be right on time. Last question, I'm going to go back to the housing issue, and particularly senior housing. I happen to be on the SAMP housing team, so I do know a little bit about this. But let's just say, the question was phrased asking, about condos on Teal Boulevard. I know we're all looking at that in the newspaper articles. But let me just take it a little bit out of that realm and just say, if you were going to create a housing project that would be good for seniors, what would you like to see? If you could just create one and that's plausible, that we can actually do in the next 5 years.
5 years, even if you were in the planning department now, 5 years would not be enough time. So let me just tell you my vision, because I've been to these places and you all have been to them too. By a show of hands, how many of you have been to the Camarillo Leisure Village? Okay. How about Seal Beach down there? Okay. I have a stepbrother who just recently, he's 57 years old, bought a place there. I also have a very good friend. She's 97 years old and has been there in the Seal Beach facility for, I want to say, at least 30 years. That concept, or that product, if you look at it as an offering, that product works. You can walk around in a safe environment. You can have your animals. You can communicate with people of a similar age. It works, folks. And some would say, well, we don't have room for it. Well, we'll find a room for it, because that product offering nationwide has worked. And I've been to 3 of them just in Southern California. And I've always asked the question, and I say this in the senior housing meetings, why can't we have one of those? Why not? You know why? Because the attention hasn't been given to seniors. For all the last 30 years, it's been about the 3-bedroom, 2-bath house with a white picket fence and the kids. That's where I'm coming from. But the attention now has to shift. You're the customers, you're the taxpayers. We need to address the needs of that group, the greatest group. Okay, now look at my parents are both gone. The greatest generation, the World War II generation. Okay, how do you take care of them? We did it in the 60s and 70s by building wonderful facilities or wonderful communities with schools. Yes, that is you. Now the question is, how do we shift that? So what the product looks like, it's Leisure Village type concept here in Thousand Oaks.
Okay, well, when we talk about communities like that, that comes at an expense. And seniors I've talked to, they can't always afford living like Leisure Village. They can't afford that. So if I was able to build a development for seniors that worked, it would be mixed income. We're going to have a variety of seniors there from different incomes. That way you can sustain the development, but there's not going to be a gap where you have seniors, I can't afford to live there. You shouldn't have to have a lower level of safety, public safety, because you may be in a lower income bracket. That is something I very strongly believe, especially when you're a senior. We have to honor our elders. And I am a big proponent of mixed income housing, and I think that would work well for seniors. We can't just focus on one income group. We have to try to target every income group and get them in. It's about need, and sometimes middle income to lower income seniors have a need that is different than people who can pay to live in a higher income area. So let's make sure we're focusing on all income brackets, not just one.
Did you want to ask a question?
I want to make a comment. To my knowledge, and I could be wrong, 2 projects that looked like they were gonna do something on Hillcrest, and I can't think of the other places, were shot down by the neighbors. Now, I was a realtor locally for 25 years, so I see both sides of it. But how is this gonna get done with the neighbors? I mean, I think it's, you know what I mean? How are you gonna be able to persuade the people who live down the block? For instance.
No, I understand. It's the NIMBY concept, not in my backyard.
Yeah.
Yeah. The idea with working through the intensity of NIMBY, not in my backyard, is to have an advocate. Somebody who's clearly focused on that will push for that in the city council where that would be a priority. This is one area where I'm in full agreement with Dan Roundtree. I'd like to see this happen in our community, and I think it needs to be an absolute focus and a priority for any councilman that steps forward into this position. If, again, as I restate that quote by Russell Kirk, politicians are actors performing a script written by the audience. When I sat with all the business developers who wanted to do the mixed use, high density, multi-use, their comment to me was, I said, what's the disconnect between the developers and the citizenry? It seems as though you guys aren't getting along. And they said, oh, that's not the case. I said, I've been walking door to door, and that's exactly the case. I work for AC Nielsen, and we did projected data. If you look, this is a major issue in the city, that the developers are not connected with the citizenry. And his comment to me, one of the folks to my right, I can't remember his name, his comment to me was, oh, anyone over 50 has no vision. And immediately I looked at him and I said, you're obviously not running for office. Now I'm going to tell you, if a representative stands in front of you and promises you something and doesn't fulfill it, as you pointed out, don't re-elect them. And so as we stand up here, if we give you a commitment, you hold us to that. You're writing the script. And I'm telling you right now, and I know that Dan and Chase feel the same way, there is not going to be a council member who will survive in this city who does not make the senior concerns absolute priority. It's that simple. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, all three. I want to say a few things before we go today, and most of you can stick around a little bit. There's follow-up questions one-on-one. Please, everyone here, thank you so much for coming. I know some of you have already filled out your ballots or are ready to. And if you brought them, I'll personally turn them in for you if you need it or put it in the mail. But it's really important that everyone here who heard them tell 10 people what you heard today. You know, call your friends. A lot of them are not going to show up. Oh, it's a small election. Please get people out. That's the main thing. Tell them you heard 3 great candidates who deserve to be voted for or against, but vote, for heaven's sakes. And thank you, everyone. Thank you,
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Somebody has a